Hi, team.
It's Lit Fam.
It's Mrs. Klein.
And Mr. Creighton. We're here with your Lesson 24 podcast, Heian Kyo, the Heart of Japan's Golden Age. Let you guys know this starts on page 331, and it's a long one. It goes to page 341. The guiding question: how was life like for aristocrats during the Heian period?
All right, and as always, we got some vocabulary words, just 3 this time. Courtier, Heian period, and Tale of Genji. All right, you guys, we're going to start this up with the introduction. The culture of medieval Japan was rich and varied due to exchanges with other Asian peoples.
As you may know, Japan is close enough to the mainland of Asia to be affected by cultural ideas from that region. At the same time, the waterways separating Japan from mainland Asia helped protect the Japanese from conquest by other Asian people.
For most of the 8th century, the city of Nara was the imperial capital of Japan. During this time, contact with China brought many new cultural ideas to Japan. Then in 794, Emperor Kamo moved the capital to Heian Kyo, an event that marked the start of the Heian period, which lasted until 1185.
The Heian period is often called Japan's Golden Age. During this time, aristocrats led a great flourishing of Japanese culture. In this lesson, you will learn more about Japan's Golden Age. You will examine how Heian aristocrats lived and how they created new kinds of Japanese art and literature.
All right, you guys, section 1 is all about a new capital. During the 8th century, the Buddhist priests of Nara gained a great deal of influence over the Japanese court. In 784, Emperor Kamo decided to move his capital away from Nara, in part because he thought the priest's power was damaging to the government.
Kamo chose a village on the Yodo River, a site that was both lovelier than Nagaoka and easier to defend. There, Kamo began building a new city he called Heian Kyo.
This event marks the beginning of the Heian period. Heian Kyo, which is now the city of Kyoto, became the first truly Japanese city.
Heian Kyo's crisscrossing streets were modeled after those of Chang'an, but the city's architecture was Japanese. In the center of the city were palaces and government offices. Wealthy Heian families lived in mansions surrounded by beautiful gardens with artificial lakes.
Daily life was very formal, and correct manners were extremely important.
All right, guys, section 2 is the rise of the Fujiwara family. By the mid-9th century, the real power in the imperial court shifted from the emperor to aristocratic families. The most important of these noble families were the Fujiwara, who controlled Japan for nearly 300 years.
The Fujiwara were never actually rulers. The Japanese believed that the emperor's family was descended from Japan's sun goddess.
First, beginning in
858,
there we go, the Fujiwara married many of their daughters into the royal family. Second, the Fujiwara acted as advisors to the emperor, which in reality gave them more power than the rulers they guided.
They were kind of smart then.
Very smart.
All right, the most successful Fujiwara leader was Fujiwara Michinaga, who led Japan from 995 to 1028.
He was the father-in-law of 4 emperors and the grandfather of 3 more.
Wow. During his time in power, the Fujiwara family became even richer and built palaces, mansions, and temples.
The Fujiwara family used their power to better their own lives. However, they also kept peace in Japan for nearly 3 centuries.
That's a long time.
It's a very long time.
All right, social position in the Heian court. Rank, as determined almost completely by the position of a person's birth family, was very important during this period.
There were 9 main ranks in the Heian court hierarchy. High court nobles appointed by the emperor filled the top 3 ranks. Less important officials filled the 4th and 5th ranks.
The 6th through the 9th ranks were filled by minor officials, clerks, and experts in such fields as law and medicine.
The 9 main ranks were divided into classes such as senior and junior, upper and lower. In total, there were some 30 sub-ranks, each of which had specific privileges and detailed rules of conduct. Members of different ranks had different types of houses and carriages.
This precise ranking system also determined such matters as what color clothing a noble could wear and the height of the gatepost in front of his family's home.
All right, guys, section 4, beauty and fashion during the Heian period. Heian society prized beauty, elegance, and fashion.
Individuals were judged on whether they had good taste, and the ability to recognize beauty was valued over qualities like generosity and honesty.
Both men and women groomed themselves with great care. Small pointed beards were considered attractive on male courtiers. For women, long hair was an important beauty feature.
All right, the Japanese of this time considered white teeth unattractive, So both men and women carefully blackened their teeth with a dye made from iron and other ingredients soaked in tea or vinegar.
For women, makeup was also important. Over a chalky powder, a Heian woman put touches of red on her cheeks and then painted a small red mouth.
A woman's clothing needed to be ornate and beautiful. An aristocratic woman might wear as many as 12 silk underrobes at one time.
The love of beauty also showed in Heian architecture, calligraphy, poetry, and artwork.
All right, moving on to entertainment at the Heian court. Heian Kyo's aristocrats had plenty of leisure time for sporting events, games, and contests. Men enjoyed watching horse races, archery contests, and sumo wrestling.
Groups of courtiers played a game called Kamari, in which they kicked a leather ball back and forth, keeping it in the air for as long as possible.
They were good at juggling then.
Very much.
All right, each of the many festivals and celebrations on the Heian calendar had its own customs. Many involved contests that tested athletic, poetic, or artistic skill.
Dancing was an important skill for Heian Kyo's nobles because dance was a part of nearly every festival. Ugaku performances, which combined dance with music and drama, were a popular form of entertainment.
All right, moving on to sculpture and painting during the Heian period. During the Heian period, many artists continued to be influenced by Chinese art. Gradually, however, sculptors and painters created their own Japanese styles.
Early Heian sculptors commonly made an entire work from a single piece of wood. Later in this period, sculptors made statues by carving separate pieces from carefully selected wood and then joining them.
Joko made perhaps the greatest masterpiece of Heian sculpture, the Amida Buddha.
In painting, Heian artists consciously developed a Japanese style, which they called Yamamoto-e, or Japanese painting. Painters drew their scenes with thin lines and then filled them with bright colors.
There were four main types of Yamato-e: landscapes showing the four seasons, places of natural beauty, people doing seasonal tasks, and scenes from literature called story painting.
All right, guys, looking at section 7, writing and literature during the Heian period. Writing was the most valued form of expression in Heian Japan. Everyone was expected to show skill in using words well.
Poetry was a part of daily life in Heian Kyo, and people were expected to compose poetry in public.
Men and women carefully crafted poems to charm each other.
In earlier times, the Japanese had used kana, which was based on simplified Chinese characters to write the syllables of their language. In Heian times, there were two ways of writing, much like we have cursive and print letters in English. One, katakana, was more formal.
The second form of writing was hiragana. Characters in hiragana are formed with simple strokes that make writing and reading easier and faster.
Over time, hiragana took its place alongside katakana as part of Japan's written language.
Calligraphy skills were viewed as important as the ability to create poetry. People believed that handwriting revealed their character and goodness better than the words that they used.
Let's find out a little bit about women at this particular time. The female companions to the courtiers of Heian Kyo were usually selected for their intelligence. Women led in the flowering of Japanese literature in the golden age of the 10th and 11th centuries.
The best-known Heian writer was Murasaki Shikibu, often referred to as Lady Murasaki. Her novel, The Tale of Genji, is a Heian masterpiece and is today considered one of the great works of world literature.
The Tale of Genji is often called the world's first novel. The book follows the life of Genji, a fictional prince, and paints a vivid picture of life in the Heian court.
The other leading writer of the time was Sei Shogunan. Like The Tale of Genji's, Shogunan's Pillow Book presents a detailed picture of life in Heian Kyo. Pillow Book is a collection of clever stories, character sketches, conversations, descriptions of art and nature, and various lists.
All right, you guys, moving on to the end of the Heian period, because all good things have to have an end. The Heian period is known as Japan's golden age of peace. However, despite the glittering imperial court, problems were brewing that would bring an end to this flourishing cultural era.
Aristocrats in Heian Kyo lived very well, but in Japan's rural areas, most people were quite poor. The wealthy looked down on the poor and ignored their problems.
The practice of giving large estates to top nobles slowly eroded the emperor's power. Those who owned these estates paid no taxes.
Japan's rulers began to lose control. Bandits roamed the countryside, and people of different religions began to band together to attack and rob one another. The government was now too weak to provide law enforcement, so estate owners created their own police forces and armies to protect their lands.
Sounds a little bit like what happens when Rome falls. By the 12th century, the power of some local lords rivaled that of the weakened imperial government. And by 1180, there was civil war in Japan.
In 1185, Minamoto Yoritomo, the head of a military family, seized power, and a new era began in which military leaders controlled Japan.
All right, now the last section, the effect of the Heian period on Japan today. As you've learned, the Heian period witnessed the birth of unique Japanese culture, and the effects of this cultural flowering are still felt today.
Heian authors influenced many later Japanese writers. The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu and Pillow Book by Sei Shonagon are classics that are as basic to Japanese culture as Shakespeare's words are to the English-speaking world.
Heian influence is also seen in modern poetry. The short poems called tanka were very popular in Heian times, and this type of poetry remains a vibrant part of Japanese literature.
Modern Japanese drama also shows Heian influences. Ogoku led to Japan's unique No theater.
All right, to summarize, you guys, a new capital and the Fujiwara family. In 794, Emperor Kamu built a new Japanese capital, Heian Kyo, marking the beginning of the Heian period. Aristocrats, especially the Fujiwara family, dominated the new imperial court and helped to create a uniquely Japanese culture.
Looking at social position, beauty and fashion, and entertainment. Born into a particular social rank, the aristocrats of Heian Kyo lived in great luxury. They prized beauty, elegance, and correct manners.
Sculpture, painting, writing, and literature. Heian artists created new Japanese forms of sculpture and painting. Court women, such as Lady Murasaki, wrote classic works of Japanese literature.
And finally, the end of the Heian period and its effects. The Heian period ended in civil war and the rise of new military leaders. However, the effects of this golden age are still felt in Japan today. Japan's culture has remained fairly constant since the Heian period, especially in literature and drama.
All right, just to wrap up, you guys, the essential question or guiding question, what was life like for aristocrats during the Heian period?
All right, in the vocab, courtier, Heian period, Tale of Genji.
All right, you guys, talk to you later.
Later.